Simply the President of the Secular Party.
Thank you. It's quite a lot to respond to there, but I'll leave most of it to the rebuttal. But as I think I made clear, we are not attacking Christian charities. We just think they should be separated out from other church activities. Now, the use of the word fair in the question we're debating implies that there's a deal going on, and that deal is either fair or it's unfair. I want to argue that this deal, whereby the Australian people provide all sorts of financial benefits to religion, was once reasonably fair, but now it is not. The tax exemption has remained pretty much the same for a long time, but what the Australian public get in return has changed completely. As Max mentioned, the advancement of religion is one category of charity under Australian law. That once made sense, but now it doesn't. I want to make two main points. One applies to the bigger, older religious organisations, and the other is about the smaller churches, but of course there is some overlap. Right from the earliest days of white settlement, government provided tremendous benefits to religion. The Church of England was the biggest beneficiary early on, but the others all got big handouts as time went on and their numbers grew. Governor Macquarie helped establish the Catholic Cathedral in Sydney, which, as he said at the time, was quite something because he was a member of the Freemasons at the time. He also provided the land for St Andrew's Cathedral in the middle of Sydney. And as I said, this kept going through 200 years of history. More and more land and other benefits kept being provided to the churches. The reasoning behind that government generosity was that most people in the community had some religious affiliation, so in a sense everyone was a winner. And there were clear benefits to the community from religion at that time. The churches had a very big role in welfare. In fact, they had it pretty much themselves, and they provided the bulk of the education in the first century of white settlement in Australia. So the deal at that stage was reasonably fair. It was certainly not perfect, and there were great debates about who got more out of the government, but the general deal was widely accepted. But now things are different. As a result of all that early generosity and tax-free investments, the bigger churches have billions of dollars and vast land holdings, and the benefits keep flowing. The Catholic Church is now the biggest non-government landholder in Australia. In the financial crash of 2008, the Anglican Archdiocese of Sydney, and that is one of, I think, 22 archdioceses around Australia, or maybe it's 23, that one archdiocese admitted to losing $160 million on its investments. That's just one archdiocese in one crash. Now, we don't know how much money they actually had at the time. We don't know how much money they've got now, but clearly it's a lot. Max has mentioned the $8 billion worth of assets that the Uniting Church has just in New South Wales. The Seventh-day Adventists own the Sanitarium Food Company and a whole lot of other assets, and various other of the churches have other very large asset bases. Secular Party members have calculated that the annual cost to taxpayers of government generosity to religions is around $20 billion a year. Now that does not include benefits paid out for education. In round numbers, it's about $11 billion in lost income tax, which includes company tax, $7 billion in capital gains tax losses, and about $2 billion lost to local and state governments. And then there are, of course, the handouts, the World Youth Day, the chaplains, the programs in schools, and so forth. So it's not small money. This is quite a serious issue. Now these numbers are only estimates, and they can only be estimates because the churches do not have to report their asset bases or their income or anything basically. So we don't know how much the subsidies really are, or how much these various tax benefits are actually worth. If religious people would like to dispute the secular party's calculations, we invite them to release the actual numbers of their asset base and their earnings. But the real point is, what do the Australian people now get as their end of the deal for providing these financial benefits? Well under 20% of Australians now attend church services. So a lot of those early social benefits the churches provided have now faded away. All Sunday school picnics and everything that used to be quite universal, they're now very much minority pastimes. More than 60% of marriages in Australia are now performed by civil celebrants. And those civil celebrants have to pay GST on their income, whereas the religious celebrants do not. Whether churches undertake welfare, and they do very well, but most of the time, they often do that under contract to governments and are paid by taxpayers. And their education role now also has massive subsidy, somewhere in the region of about $10 billion a year. So, excluding welfare work that we agree is justifiable in its own right, what is left as the religious contribution to Australian society? The main impact of religion on society now is public advocacy of values and beliefs that are imposed by the majority of Australians. Governments provide huge financial assistance to what are effectively lobbyists for the past. Religious leaders and their administrative bureaucracies pressure governments to stick with the values of a small and ageing minority. They try, with great success, it must be admitted, to block the will of the people. Polling shows that somewhere between 70 and 80% of people favour some form of voluntary euthanasia. But the churches don't want it, so we don't get it. Now, the churches don't always win. In the fight for a woman's right to end an unwanted pregnancy, women basically won in the end, but the vast wealth of the churches made it a nasty battle that has actually never really concluded. The point is, the majority of Australians get no benefit from their government's generosity towards religion. They get disbenefit. The will of the majority is frustrated by a tiny but well-funded minority. This is not a good deal. This is not fair. Note, I am not arguing against the beliefs of the religious. They have a perfect entitlement to believe whatever they want. But I am arguing that no Australian should be forced to provide financial support to such lobby groups. They're already extremely well provided for after 200 years of public generosity. Enough is enough. Now to the point about small churches. Many of these do not have the asset bases piled up over 200 years that the larger churches have. But they do get tax exemptions, including fringe benefits exemptions for their clergy, and they do get tax exemptions for business enterprises. The question is, what do the Australian people get in return for their generosity? In many cases, they get fractured families as cult-like groups enforce strict regimes on their parishioners. I know from family experience the damage that Scientology can do, for example, with tax benefits. Then there's the unfair competition as tradesmen and small business operators lose out to religiously owned operations that have tax benefits and often use labour from within the group at exploitative rates. Children within the groups are indoctrinated in absurd ideas to the point where they become highly unlikely to